everyone. Tonight I will be repeating Max David's claim that it is necessary for drug companies to test on animals. The supporting claims used in his argument were 1. Animals make better and easier test subjects. 2. Animals are easier to monitor than humans. 3. The variables for the animals are standardized. 4. Transgenics is more viable in animals than humans. For the purpose of my refutation, I will discuss the misrepresentations in the advocate's first supporting claim that animals make better and easier test subjects. I will support my refutation by discussing with all of you that 1. Animals do not make ideal test subjects. 2. There are alternatives to animal testing. And 3. There is a huge misconception of the effectiveness of this method of research. Max starts off his argument by saying and making it a point that the audience knows that all variables are standardized within an experiment. However, I would like to start off with saying that animals, in fact, do not make ideal test subjects simply for the fact that they are physiologically different than humans. Dr. Thomas Dixon, a research fellow at Churchill College in Cambridge, writes in his article entitled Animal Experimentation that most animal experiments are done on animals that are nothing like human beings, rats and mice, which undermines the argument that these experiments are a reliable guide to human reactions. Scientifically, as well as morally, most animal experimentation is to be rejected. The reaction of a mouse to a substance is no guide to human reaction. Each species has its own unique physiology. Secondly, Gaynor Borade, a researcher in this field, goes on to state that it is very important to be sensitive to the treatment meted out to these lower species. In fact, it is our power of discrimination and reasoning and sensitivity that actually makes us superior. It is disgusting, she says, to note that less than 2% of all human illnesses are on record in the animal kingdom, and yet we use these to find cures to self-inflicted illnesses that have been invited upon us with unhealthy and restructured living and eating habits. She goes on to make the startling revelation that research reveals that only 5 to 25% of the animal tests that human results are agreeable. Most of the drugs passed by animal tests are now discarded as useless to humans. So to put things in perspective to you, the researchers have a better chance of getting it right if they were to just flip a coin in their laboratory. It is interesting to note that through reading Borade's research, I learned that at least 83% of substances are metabolized differently by animals and humans. Most medical experts agree that data from animal tests cannot be extrapolated safely to human patients. In animal testing, while lemon juice, which is safe for humans, is a deadly poison, and arsenic and botulinum are safe. Obviously, a very, very drastic difference between our physiology. As stated in the Animal Aid website, many drugs which were passed as safe in animal tests have caused serious side effects and even deaths in people, similar to the claim made through Borade's research. Studies have shown that 95% of drugs passed as safe by animal tests are later discarded as useless or dangerous. It is hardly surprising that in a recent opinion poll, 82% of doctors questioned said that they were concerned that animal tests could be and probably were misleading. After all of this disheartening information, that leads me to my second point, which says that alternatives to animal testing directly counters the advocate's main claim that states it is necessary for drug companies to test on animals. The world of science has on record more than 400 different methods that can effectively replace animal experiments. It is important to consider the options since at least 33 animals die in laboratories each second worldwide. There is no doubt that medical progress can be achieved without abusing animals. Kara Rogers, a PhD in the area of pharmacology and toxicology from the University of Arizona, wrote an excellent summary of the alternatives to animal testing. She states the alternatives to animal testing are primarily based on biochemical tests, on experiments in cells that are carried out in vitro or within the glass, and on computational models and algorithms. These techniques are typically far more sophisticated and specific than traditional approaches to testing in whole animals, and many in vitro tests are capable of producing information about the biological effects of a test compound that are as accurate as, and in some cases more accurate than, information collected from studies in whole animals. In addition, basic research is focusing increasingly on developing models based on organisms that are less expensive and more experimentally efficient than mammals. Another example of an alternative is that of a replacement for a toxicity test. A toxicity test performed on animals that often produces inaccurate results is the Drazy test, in which a chemical is applied to the skin or eye of a rabbit, specifically. The results are supposed to indicate how toxic a chemical is to human skin. The inaccuracy of the DRAZ test has been recognized for many years, but its replacement has not been a simple matter, and the development of better in vitro techniques has taken nearly a decade. The European Union recently approved a replacement for the DRAZ test called the EpiSkin test, which is an in vitro method that uses test tube-sized models of human skin instead of actually testing on animals directly. Its approval is a milestone in the progress toward discovering reliable alternatives to animal testing and serves as a model for the development of other alternative techniques. Now to conclude with my third point, that there is a huge misconception of the effectiveness of animal testing. Researchers from Harvard and Boston Universities concluded that medical measures, drugs, and vaccines accounted for between 1 and 3.5% only of the total decline in mortality rate since 1900. Scores of animals were killed in the quest to find cures for tuberculosis, scarlet fever, smallpox, diphtheria, among others. But was their unwilling contribution important to the decline of these diseases? Dr. Edward Cass of Harvard Medical School asserts that the primary credit for the virtual eradication of these diseases must go to improvements in public health, sanitation, and general improvement in the standard of living. These benefits have nothing to do with animal studies. The Journal of the American Medical Association reported in April 1998 that adverse reactions to prescription drugs, all of which first pass a battery of animal tests, kill more than 100,000 humans each year. Animal tests fail to predict these dangers. This is not surprising since non-human animals are unable to relate the most common side effects that occur with prescription medications such as headaches, dizziness, depression, or nausea. These symptoms are often the initial signs of more severe problems. In conclusion, I hope that you will all agree with me that the advocates' claim that it is necessary for drug companies to test on animals is false. Based on my points, that animals do not make ideal test subjects. There are better alternatives to testing, and lastly, that there is a huge misconception behind the effectiveness of these methods.
All right, well, primarily you create your own structure for responding to the advocate's claims. You're going to do counterclaims on most of these points, and the arguments are developed pretty well. You've got a lot of good evidence on each of those points. There's not much analysis of the evidence and reasoning that was used by the advocate, so contrasting your claims to the advocate's claims is not being done in this particular argument. I do think, for instance, that there's a presupposition here that these things have to be mutually exclusive, and I would assume that the advocate would be taking the position that all these things need to be done. So, for instance, the alternative test that you describe in the later part of the speech, certainly they're viable and reasonable things to do, but in addition to animals, as opposed to a replacement for animals, especially since a couple of your statistics suggest one 5 to 20% and another one 95%, that there is in fact some element of success. The alternative is using something that's untested, for instance on humans whatsoever, seems to be an unacceptable alternative. By the way, at the very end, I think when you talk about the adverse drug reactions, one of those interesting points is that also those things were tested on humans before they were used by people in the mass market or prescribed by doctors. So they not only failed with animal tests, they failed with human tests too. So I'm not sure that that makes the animal test uniquely problematic. All right. Thank you.